the paparazzi, millions of fans.
I love you, Farrah!
Thank you.
Even our own camera crew.
Oh my God.
We were all chasing Farrah.
Farrah, come here, we love you. We want to give you a building as a gift.
Thank you, that's so nice.
Ever since reality TV has become a reality, everyone's been after her.
Farrah, to us, is, from a reality show, she's the holy grail. Fantasize what that life might be like.
Even if you kept the cameras on the whole time, if I lost my temper, it would be justified.
In March 2005, Farrah Fawcett, the gorgeous blonde bombshell who rose to fame in ABC's hit show Charlie's Angels and graced the walls of nearly every boys' college dorm room in the 1970s, joined the ranks of massive celebrities turned reality stars with the premiere of her new show, Chasing Farrah. Fawcett seemed to be perfect fodder for the tawdry world of reality television in the early 2000s, which was populated around this time by the likes of Anna Nicole Smith, Britney Spears, and others. She was beautiful, extremely famous, and unafraid of controversy with her romantic entanglements over the years with leading men like Lee Majors and Ryan O'Neal, not to mention a memorably disastrous interview on The Late Show with David Letterman in the late 90s. Plus, Farrah always had something to prove, as people often chalked up her career to the age of so-called jiggle television that focused on the sex appeal of female characters as opposed to developing plot and narrative. Let's just say Charlie's Angels wouldn't really hold up in the golden age of television to come against the likes of Mad Men and The Sopranos. But Chasing Farrah never really broke out into a huge reality show sensation, and perhaps that's a credit to Fawcett. Unlike Anna Nicole Smith and Britney Spears, who became captivating stars of this world with their zany and unhinged antics in front of the cameras, critics found Farrah a bit too dignified for this world. Television critic Robert Philpott of the Fort Worth Star-Telegram said, quote, "Fawcett is likable enough, but she's unusually tame for this sort of fare. In this genre, you need something outrageous to be worthy of sticking around. As Steve Murray of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution acerbically put it, it's like there's no there worth chasing." On top of the poor reviews for the reality show, Fawcett was also facing personal tragedy in her life. Her older sister Diane Fawcett Walls passed away a few years earlier in 2001 from lung cancer just shy of her 63rd birthday, and Fawcett's mother, Pauline, passed away while the show was filming in March of 2005. In the midst of dealing with these losses and the lukewarm reception of her reality show, things started to turn around in August 2006 when Fawcett reunited with her Charlie's Angels co-stars Kate Jackson and Jacqueline Smith to honor the legendary late producer Aaron Spelling, giving Farrah an emotional boost when she needed it most, and potentially kickstarting her career again as she bathed in the public's enduring affection for her. But in the days following the reunion, Fawcett told friends she felt very fatigued, saying, "My body is just killing me." At first, she thought she'd eaten some bad spinach and possibly contracted E. coli or some form of food poisoning, but a visit to the doctor in September 2006 ended up with much more devastating news. Fawcett was diagnosed with anal cancer and immediately began an aggressive regimen of chemotherapy and surgery. Just 59 at the time, Fawcett had a choice to retreat from the spotlight to battle the illness privately, or become an unlikely spokesperson for a rare but deadly affliction with around 5,000 annual cases in the United States, accounting for around 700 deaths each year. Anal cancer can be difficult to detect because its symptoms are sometimes mistaken for hemorrhoids, and there's a level of embarrassment surrounding the disease that makes people hesitant to visit doctors early enough to treat it. Cancer is also often associated with gay men, but more than half of the diagnoses and deaths occur in women. Put simply, Fawcett put a face to the disease. And at first, the treatments worked. On her 60th birthday in February 2007, reports surfaced that Fawcett was cancer-free, but the good news didn't last long. By May, the cancer returned, this time metastasizing and spreading to her liver, and leaving her with a grim prognosis as the cancer advanced to terminal stage 4. Fawcett continued the fight, pursuing experimental treatments in Germany, and her good friend Alana documented the actress's battle for her life. She was hospitalized again in April with a painful abdominal hematoma, and by May, her longtime partner Ryan O'Neal said she was spending her days at home and mostly asleep as she entered the final stages of her life. Her 91-year-old father, James, flew in for a visit, and her troubled son, Redmond, visited his dying mother, although he was shackled and under supervision because he was still serving time for a drug-related offense. In her last moments, Fawcett's friend, Mila Murphy, who was by Farrah's side at St. John's Medical Center in Los Angeles, said the actress kept saying her son's name, leading Murphy to promise that she'd always look out for Redmond. And on the morning of June 25, 2009, Fawcett died. She was just 62 years old. I'm Derek Kaufman.
I'm Jason Beckerman.
And this is Last Days, Farrah Fawcett.
It's impossible to talk about the passing of Farrah Fawcett without mentioning the timing. On any other day, June 25, 2009, would have been dominated by headlines and coverage about Fawcett's death, mourning the passing of a true legend and icon. And that's exactly what happened for the first few hours after her death, when the story broke around 8 a.m. The coverage continued this way until the late afternoon, when a perhaps more unexpected tragedy cast an enormous shadow over the media landscape: the death of Michael Jackson. By way of one example, CNN's Larry King Live had planned a show exclusively about the life and legacy of Farrah Fawcett that evening, but quickly pivoted to cover both stories once news of MJ's passing came out. Still, Larry King made sure to pay his respects, saying Charlie's Angels got huge numbers every week. Nothing really dominates the television landscape like that today. She was a major TV star when the medium was clearly dominant. But others overlooked her contributions, including most notably Fawcett's omission from the In Memoriam segment of the Academy Awards ceremony that year. Some justified the exclusion by noting she was a television, not a film star. She did appear in several movies over the years, including The Apostle, Cannonball Run, and Logan's Run. But Fawcett's friends and colleagues like Ryan O'Neal, Jane Fonda, and even Roger Ebert lambasted the oversight, quickly noting how Michael Jackson also wasn't a film star, but was included in the montage. We'll explore Michael Jackson's story in depth in next week's special episodes commemorating the 15th anniversary of his death, but suffice it to say, the remembrances and retrospectives for Fawcett immediately gave way to an avalanche of breaking news and developments about the death of the King of Pop. In many ways, we still use the nomenclature of this moment when we discuss the timing of celebrity deaths in the news business, and you'll often hear of someone getting, quote, Farrah Fawcetted when two celebrities die on the same day. Obviously, Derek, this is a huge moment in my career. I just started at TMZ when Farrah Fawcett died, and the news, as we do around here, when somebody of her stature dies, all the news turned to breaking news stories about her death, getting comments from those close to her, filling out the news story. And then a few hours later, we got the news and reported exclusively that Michael Jackson had died. And
you live this in real time. You were at TMZ already. I was not. I was still at a law firm, and I remember processing it differently. I remember Farrah Fawcett's death, and you would read all of the coverage, and then it was akin to an eclipse. It was really akin to just the sun blotting out, and that was it. All the coverage on every news outlet, including TMZ, of course, breaking the Michael Jackson death, became Michael Jackson oriented.
Right.
And it was as if Farrah Fawcett, who is a huge icon, and we'll discuss her in this episode, her death didn't matter.
That's right. And as we alluded to, look, she died after a long battle with cancer, and she hadn't been performing publicly in quite some time. Michael Jackson was very different. He was on this road back from
the This Is It tour.
This Is It tour, coming back from the molestation charges and everything else, and this is going to be his grand reemergence onto the scene. And his death was so shocking, number one. Number two, there were all sorts of questions about whether or not he'd actually died and how he died. Farrah's was much more cut and dry, and because of that, she just didn't get the coverage she deserved, frankly.
I think that's right. And to be clear, it really took someone of Michael Jackson's enormous fame and the circumstances of his death to just blot out the sun and replace Fawcett's coverage. It wasn't as if any death could have done that. It was just the circumstances of Michael Jackson's death really did it. And indeed, just a month before her death, a 2-hour documentary filmed by Fawcett and her friend Alana Stewart called Farrah's Story had aired on NBC.
Every day, I try to remind myself, to ask of myself, did I try my best today? That's all I ask of myself, and I wouldn't be truthful if I said yes. I succeeded every single day. But the will, the spirit, the desire to live, I will never compromise.
And the premiere was a huge event, replete with red carpet events where Stewart and Ryan O'Neal gave interviews and shared fond memories of Farrah and her courageous fight with cancer.
The film, called Farrah's Story, is a video diary chronicling her 2.5-year battle with cancer. The blonde beauty's longtime partner, Ryan O'Neal, and best friend Alan Stewart were on the red carpet to support the film.
She wanted to share her journey with other people who were going through the same battle, and she wanted to perhaps give them a little bit of encouragement and support and strength, and she's done it with incredible dignity. It's an amazing story.
She's easy to love. And she was smart. That was a trick that she tried to keep from people. But you periodically you go, whoa, wait. And she was funny.
And the documentary, this is to your point, was watched by nearly 9 million people and was so successful as a documentary that it was re-aired several times on the broadcast network's cable stations, MSNBC, Bravo, and Oxygen. And Fawcett even posthumously earned her 4th Emmy nomination as a producer of the story. So to your point, people were already processing the decline of Farrah Fawcett, her battle with cancer. It was a very public news event, and her death, while very, very sad, was not unexpected. She was waging a public battle with stage 4 cancer. It wasn't going to end well.
Yeah, and so the reactions to the two deaths are so dissimilar, right? One was expected, and it was very sad, and she was a huge star in her own right, but Michael Jackson's was so
shocking.
Out of the blue, shocking, all the criminal elements of it that sort of quickly came to light. It was just a very different sort of reaction to it. But despite the dominance of Michael Jackson's death in mainstream news coverage, Fawcett's death certainly didn't go unnoticed in the entertainment community because people had closely watched her battle with cancer over the final years of her life. The outpouring of affectionate remembrances were more reflective and somber as opposed to expressing shock and devastation. In reflecting on the loss of her co-star, Jaclyn Smith, who played Kelly Garrett on Charlie's Angels, said, quote, "Farrah was relentless in her fight. Who would have dreamed that this girl, who was so known for her smile and the hair and the glamour, would open up the depths of her soul to share with the world?" Smith spoke warmly about their 40-year friendship, even sharing a story about one of their final visits, saying, quote, "Farrah brought me a German chocolate cake she'd made. Then I found her in my closet. Her legs were swollen due to the treatment, but she wanted to try on a pair of my shoes. She was a true girlfriend. She was in pain and couldn't stay still. We must have talked for 3 hours about our lives, about our children, about growing up in Texas. The time I spent with Farrah at the end was the best because we appreciated the friendship." She fittingly concluded, quote, "Farrah had courage, she had strength, and she had faith, and now she has peace as she rests with the real angels." Kate Jackson and Cheryl Ladd, two other former alums from Charlie's Angels, added their condolences. Jackson said, quote, "I will miss Farrah every day. She was a selfless person who loved her family and friends with all her heart, and what a big heart it was. When I think of Farrah, I will remember her kindness, her cutting dry wit, and of course, her beautiful smile." And Ladd added, "She was incredibly brave, and God will be welcoming her with open arms."
I wanted to pause briefly on the remembrances from her fellow Charlie's Angels. There could have been a lot of rancor. I mean, Farrah Fawcett was such a breakout star. She was the biggest angel of all.
She was Gladys Knight. She was, she was the star among them all who quickly overshadowed the other angels.
And yet the stories are about her kindness.
Yes.
And I found that sort of deeply moving because she could have been a prima donna. She could have said, "I'm bigger than the show," and they were riding in my wake and on my coattails. And none of them had stories like that. They were like, she was a girlfriend. You go over her house, she'd bake you a cake.
And it wasn't just the dying remembrances. These people were friends of hers throughout their entire post-Charlie's Angels run. They were very close. They would show up at dinners together. They were very close friends for a long time.
Yeah.
And of course, Ryan O'Neal, whose on-again, off-again 30-year relationship with Fawcett largely defined both of their lives, kept it simple, saying, quote, "I loved her with all my heart. I will miss her so very, very much." Interestingly, O'Neal was not named in her living trust, although Fawcett left most of her reported $4.5 million fortune in a trust for their son Redmond. Fawcett left all of her artwork to the University of Texas, although there was a controversy in 2011 when the university complained that O'Neal had retained one of her most valuable pieces, a portrait of her painted by Andy Warhol, that O'Neal claimed Fawcett specifically gifted to him. The dispute even went to court, where O'Neal eventually won and was allowed to keep the artwork.
A private funeral for Fawcett was held in Los Angeles on June 30th, 2009. Farrah's son, Redmond, was permitted to leave his California detention center to attend the funeral and delivered a reading at the service. Fawcett was buried at Westwood Village Memorial Park. Her simple tombstone bearing just her name is next to Rodney Dangerfield at the cemetery. Let's go ahead and take a quick break. More on Farrah Fawcett's legacy when we return. Farrah Fawcett's career can be neatly cleaved into two distinct periods, before and after the red bathing suit. She first came to Hollywood in 1968 and appeared in a number of commercials for home products like Ultra Bright toothpaste, Noxzema skin cream, and Max Factor cosmetics. You know, she was a stunning beauty, so she was in all these beauty commercials. You can look some of them up online. Fawcett also landed guest spots on some of the popular shows of the period like The Flying Nun and I Dream of Jeannie. Her 4-episode run on The $6 Million Man, however, introduced Fawcett to her future husband, Lee Majors.
The $6 Million Man, a top-secret government weapon until a lady reporter digs for the facts behind his incredible powers.
Today, I was lucky enough to see one of your scientific developments in action.
Do you have any idea what would happen if certain people saw that film?
Steve Austin's next assignment, The Peeping Blonde.
Fawcett and Majors would later marry in 1973, and she even used the name Farrah Fawcett Majors in her screen credits around that time. And Majors would later reflect on their marriage many years later, saying, quote, "People would tell me we were the Brad and Angelina of our time." And I put that in there to give you a sense of who Lee Majors is and how he sees himself, but also to indicate that the 70s were a time when Farrah Fawcett and Lee Majors were A-listers.
They were the it couple. They
Right.
were the couple that everybody looked at. They were both very, very good looking, and everybody talked about them. They knew this couple very well.
So you weren't struck by the Brad and Angelina comparison.
I'm
You
not,
think it's on
not at
point.
all struck by it.
Yeah.
They were the equivalent of the time.
Yes. But everything would change in 1976 when a company called Pro Arts Inc. pitched the idea of a poster to Fawcett's agent. And according to her friend, Fawcett styled her own hair that day and did her makeup for the shoot, even using a squeeze of lemon juice to accentuate her blonde highlights. The photographer was a man named Bruce McBroom, and he recalled that the company wanted a bikini shot, but they didn't have a bikini on hand. So Farrah went into her closet and put on what she had, a red one-piece swimsuit. Fawcett selected her favorite 6 pictures from the 40 rolls of film shot that day, and the final choice, a shot of Farrah sitting with one knee up in that red one-piece and flashing her trademark smile, became an absolute sensation. With millions of copies sold, the U.S. Smithsonian has officially declared it to be, and Jason, this struck me, the best-selling poster of all time. Do you remember this poster?
Of course.
I mean, men of a certain age just remember this poster. I remember it. I'm a little young for it, but I can picture it in my mind. You close your eyes. It is simply one of the most famous images in Hollywood history.
Just to show, so I was born in 1971. The poster of Farrah Fawcett, by the time that I was in my mid-teens, in the mid-'80s, was still ubiquitous on people's walls. Others had come along, and this was the age where I don't think boys, maybe they do, but I don't think they put bombshells on their walls anymore.
Not as much.
I think it's pretty disrespectful now. It's not quite as looked upon in the same way. But back then, every boy had these things. And Farrah Fawcett's poster, a good 10 years after she had taken it, when so many other women had come along trying to capture that same magic, she was still number one.
Yeah, and what do you think it was? I wanted to pause on this because,
She's really good looking.
She's really good looking, and she's all American, and she's wholesome. It is not an overly sexual poster. It's not a bikini.
She was also a big-time television star.
Yep.
And that's something that the Heather Thomases and of the world, who were also big pinup models, they didn't have that of that era, didn't have also the stardom. And so they were famous for being beautiful. I don't want to understand.
No, Raquel Welch had posters. Other people had posters.
That's back in a different day. But in the 80s, she was the one. Everybody else was beautiful, and they'd have their own posters. But Farrah Fawcett was also not just beautiful, but was really, really famous. Yeah. And so I think that just gave her a leg up, so to speak.
Yeah, the poster holds up. You guys should look it up. It's a pretty incredible
Or not. I look back on that with maybe a touch of regret. I mean, I was a kid, but what do I know? But a little touch of regret, the way we would sort of literally objectify.
I agree with you, except she was so in control of her image.
Yeah.
When you read about the stories from the shoot, she didn't regret it at all. She actually got the one-piece bathing suit. It's not overly tawdry or anything like that. She's just beautiful. She's got the feathered hair and the beautiful smile.
And she made a ton of money off of it.
And she made a ton of money.
Yeah. On the heels of her meteoric rise from the poster, Fawcett earned a supporting role in the sci-fi film Logan's Run, and a meeting with one of Lee Majors' tennis buddies, television producer Aaron Spelling, would end up changing her life forever when she was cast to play Jill Monroe in an upcoming made-for-TV movie called Charlie's Angels.
Once upon a time, there were 3 little girls who went to the police academy.
The show, starring Fawcett, Kate Jackson, and Jacqueline Smith as private investigators working for a reclusive millionaire named Charlie, who spoke to them only through a speakerphone, became a huge sensation, propelling all of the women to become overnight celebrities. But Fawcett stood out, dominating popularity polls and even popularizing a trend among women that became known as the Farrah Flip, or simply Farrah hair. The network capitalized on the success of the movie and immediately approved production for a series, which debuted in September 1976. But despite her massive star turn, Farrah left the show in 1977 after only 1 season. A series of legal battles with ABC over a contract ended with Cheryl Ladd being brought on to replace Fawcett. Many have cited the strain on her marriage to Lee Majors and a desire to branch out into more serious acting roles as contributing factors to her abrupt decision to leave the hit show. Whatever the reason, her enduring association with the show in just a single season is a testament to her appeal and the massiveness of her cultural moment. After Charlie's Angels, Fawcett went on to film roles, but she was never able to fully land the transition to the big screen. She landed parts in movies like 1978's Somebody Killed Her Husband, a box office flop that critics referred to as Somebody Killed Her Career, her work in Saturn III, an underperforming sci-fi movie starring Kirk Douglas, and The Cannonball Run, a star-studded comedic romp starring Burt Reynolds, Dean Martin, and Sammy Davis Jr., didn't fare much better. Fawcett then shifted her attention to the stage, receiving critical acclaim for her role in an off-Broadway production of a play called Extremities. Playing a rape victim who turns the tables on her attacker, the role was much grittier than the jiggle TV fare she was used to from Charlie's Angels. In 1986, she reprised the role in a film version of the play, which performed decently at the box office and ended up garnering her a Golden Globe nomination for Best Performance by an Actress in a Motion Picture Drama.
But she wasn't able to sustain the success, and her later career drifted into tabloid territory. After a career spent purposefully avoiding nudity despite numerous lucrative offers, she famously appeared in a 1997 pictorial in Playboy at the age of 50, an issue which, like her iconic poster, quickly became a top seller. The same year, Fawcett also gave a famously rambling interview during an appearance on The Late Show with David Letterman.
Very nice of you to be here.
Well, I'm so happy to be here.
Now, you've never been on this program before. You were never on this program before. You were never on the other program we did at the other network. Is there any reason?
You don't remember?
Remember?
Just kidding. No. No. Let me think. Why?
Why what?
Haven't I been?
I don't know. That's what I had just asked you.
Oh. Well.
How you doing? You all right?
Don't I seem all right?
It's weird. Give it a watch if you have the time. They never really get a rhythm for the banter. You know, David Letterman has a handful of these moments. He has them with Andy Kaufman.
Not the only one.
She's not alone.
Madonna had a weird one. Howard Stern had a weird one.
Crispin Glover had a very famous weird one.
Yes.
So
because Letterman, when you started to go off the rails, he would sort of allow you to go.
That's right.
He wasn't the Jay Leno host who would bring it back together and try to remain light. He would let you embarrass yourself. And it's not a criticism of Letterman, it's just who he was. He would let you embarrass, and I think that's what he did with Farrah Fawcett.
I do too, because she seems distracted, a little bit out of it, but he's also relishing that it's going off the rails and knowing that there's a moment happening. I don't think it's mean-spirited, but it is...
it's a little mean-spirited, don't you think?
Potentially.
That's who Letterman was. Not mean-spirited, but he wanted those authentic moments, and he wasn't there to just like pat you on the back and tell you how great you are. He was there to have real moments.
I think that's right.
Farrah.
And the appearance prompted a fresh round of concern trolling from her fans that the television icon was drunk or on drugs. I remember this very well because she was already sort of a fading icon. And what I knew about Farrah Fawcett at the time was this Letterman interview. And then I looked back into her Charlie's Angels stuff. Months later, Fawcett would tell Howard Stern that she was just joking around with Letterman and trying to interact with the audience, but it became such a famous moment that years later, in February 2009, Letterman ended an incoherent interview with Joaquin Phoenix, another famous one, by saying, "We owe an apology to Farrah Fawcett." So he knew it was one of his biggest shows, and he was saying, Joaquin was so much worse, I should apologize to Farrah.
That name became the sort of, the proxy for interviews gone wrong, and so he used that in that context as well.
Yeah. Despite her missteps toward the end of her career, fascination with Farrah Fawcett never completely waned. The iconic image of her in the red swimsuit was even recreated for a limited edition Barbie doll, and in 2011, Men's Health magazine named Fawcett one of the 100 hottest women of all time. We don't really do these lists anymore, but she got on one of them in 2011.
I think there's plenty of these lists online.
I guess they still exist.
Maybe not by Men's Health magazine, but they still.
Sure. And fun fact, the song Midnight Train to Georgia, I wanted to include this, was actually inspired by a conversation by songwriter Jim Weatherly that he had with Farrah Fawcett. Weatherly was a man who was friends with Lee Majors at the time and chatted briefly with Fawcett over the phone one day, during which she told him she was going to visit her mother and was taking, quote, the midnight plane to Houston. Weatherly ended up using the line in a song he penned called Midnight Plane to Houston about a failed actress leaving Los Angeles and being followed by a boyfriend who simply can't live without her. Here's a clip of it.
And she's leaving on the midnight plane to Houston, going back to a simpler place and time.
And if that sounds familiar, try swapping the genders, changing the plane to a train, and replacing Houston with Georgia, and what you're left with is one of Gladys Knight and the Pips' biggest hits from 1973. So I thought that was a really interesting fact.
I had no idea. That's a great fun fact. I love that.
It's about Farrah Fawcett. From the time of her debut as the standout beauty and breakout star of Charlie's Angels, Farrah Fawcett captured the public's imagination, and for better or worse, became an enduring object of male fantasy. And this actually makes her a tricky subject for this podcast. It's easy to just reduce her life to a relic of the 70s and a single iconic poster hanging in the room of teenage boys around the country. But to those who knew her best, Fawcett was much, much more. Funny, warm, empathetic, outspoken on the things she cared deeply about, and unwilling to be defined solely by the male gaze. And perhaps nobody knew her better than her longtime partner, Ryan O'Neal. Both dealt with a public unwilling to accept them as more than just a pretty face, but their relationship was much more nuanced and complex than a couple of attractive people in love. And although he recently passed away himself in late 2023, O'Neal spent a decent chunk of his last decade of life thinking, writing, and speaking about Farrah, including penning a memoir about their love story and helping in a way to correct the unfortunate timing of her passing that left her legacy tied to and in the shadow of Michael Jackson. And so I thought it only fitting to give O'Neal the final word, heard here telling the story of how the famously and unapologetically unmarried couple nearly tied the knot during her final days.
There were times she had to return to St. John's Hospital. Several times. And there was a priest there, the hospital priest, Father Kelly. And he suggested that he would marry us. And she said, okay, let's get married. But by then, she was so weak that he was only able to give her the last rites.